Hey everybody, hope you're staying safe, hope all's well. This is, I guess, part 3 of my little lecture series that we're doing here. Today I'm really just going to give a brief discussion on 1965 and 66 and the escalation by Lyndon Baines Johnson, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, Secretary of State Dean Rusk, and the general on the ground in Vietnam for our boys, General William Westmoreland, and how they continued to ask for more and more troops against the North Vietnamese Army and Viet Cong forces, and how this gradual escalation is going to eventually lead to, I guess, protest movements that are going to spring out across the country in 67, 68, 69, and into the Nixon administration as well. So just real briefly, after the election of 64, when LBJ destroyed Barry Goldwater, and then also having been given the Gulf of Tonkin resolution and the blank check to do whatever he wanted, he starts increasing troops, and I gave you the numbers in the last video. As our men are getting on the ground and they're fighting, they start to realize some things. This is an enemy that is very elusive. There's tunnel systems throughout the entire country, specifically the Ho Chi Minh Trail that runs all the way from the northern border of North Vietnam all the way down into the south. The tunnel systems even go over into Cambodia, Laos in certain places. So the enemy's not really fighting conventionally. They're using guerrilla tactics. And what starts to happen is our men are on the ground in the jungle. They're walking along a platoon. Next thing you know, someone opens fire, bombs go off, booby trap happens, whatever it may be, and the enemy goes down into the tunnels and is gone. So what we start to do is start to sort of view everybody as the enemy. So civilian villages, hamlets, and things like that are going to come under attack. There's going to be search and destroy missions that are going to take place because we feel that the local community, the local population, is in some way aiding and abetting our enemy. In some cases they were. In many cases they were being forced to do it by the local militaries and militias and things over there in Vietnam. But we would end up, burning down an entire village. And this did happen. These were called search and destroy missions, and they were captured on film. And actually, 60 Minutes did a piece on this with Ed Bradley, where he showed one of these missions. And it's really starting to go against what our administration was trying to do, which was to win the hearts and minds of the people over there, the people in South Vietnam, and the people that didn't want to be communist. So when you're burning down their villages, we're using new weapons of war, fairly new weapons of war. Napalm is being used, which is a gelatinous fire bomb that sticks to everything. When you're dropping that, and civilians at times are being struck with this weapon, that's not going to help anything. It's not going to help you win the hearts and minds. And when we were using this new exfoliate, dropping it from the planes called Agent Orange, and it was supposed to get rid of a lot of the foliage and things like that, so we could better see the enemy on the ground in the jungles if the leaves and things are all gone, so we could bomb them. The problem with that, of course, is these people live subsistently off of the land, and it's going to obviously destroy their crops, and it's going to get into the water system. And Agent Orange, it would eventually be found to actually be cancer-causing, and many of our troops, unfortunately, also suffered the consequences of that weapon of war. So trying to win the hearts and minds was a difficult thing, and it was not working. And stay in your seats, please. So anyway, we're trying to then we're saying, well, we're gonna use this what General Westmoreland called a war of attrition, and we're gonna tell the enemy every night on the news. And this is the first satellite war, whereby when I say satellite war, I mean we are able to beam images and press conferences and things like that from Vietnam via the satellites back to America and around the globe, really, and it can be on the nightly news that evening. And we're going to, Westmoreland is going to tell the enemy every day how many casualties that they have sustained, and we feel by doing this war of attrition, we will defeat them by defeating their morale and feeling that they have no choice but to surrender. And really, it has the exact opposite effect, because they use it as a recruiting tool, saying, "See, we're losing and people are dying, and therefore we need more and more troops." So it really didn't work out very well. And then to add to that, the overwhelming majority of the troops are draftees, people who are forced to do this and go and spend about 15 months in the brush, so to speak. When they didn't necessarily want to be there. And I'm going to talk in the next installment of my little lecture series here about the draft and ways to manipulate it, and who was being drafted and who was being forced to fight, who was able to get out of it. But when you have that, the people are really there. Our troops, many of them are there just trying to sustain their own lives. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And that is a problem. Alcohol use is very high amongst the troops. In 1970, the Department of Defense studied it and found that 70% of forces on the ground were using some sort of illegal or illicit drugs, heroin, marijuana, things like that. And in 1970, the Department of Defense also found that 290 of our own forces were killed by our own forces. That's called fragging. So that means you have these young officers being sent out to lead men into battle, and a lot of these young soldiers and Marines and stuff felt that these young officers were taking chances with their lives, and the best way around that might be to knock off that officer in a battle. So we had our own killing our own, and that's called fragging, and that is obviously problematic as well. All of that stuff and the images going out into American living rooms every evening on the nightly news was called the living room war. And when people are seeing these images and all this sort of stuff back home, the mindset starts to change, where we originally in 1965 had over 60% of Americans who supported action in Vietnam. As they turn on the TVs every evening and see Walter Cronkite, the newsman, showing the images, men coming home in body bags, seeing napalm attacks, Agent Orange, search and destroy missions, all these things, people start to shift their belief in should we be in this war or not. It creates a bit of a credibility gap. What we're being told, how we're winning this thing, but the images that are coming out of Vietnam don't really correspond or correlate to the positives that are being at least portrayed by General Westmoreland, Robert McNamara, Lyndon Johnson himself. And that's going to be in the next series in this little lecture thing I'm doing. I'm going to talk about the actual shift in the American population, protests that are going to start to happen, and how they're going to grow, and all of the changes that are going to occur back home here because of the Vietnam War. I hope everybody's staying safe. I'll send something out next week. Take care. Bye.